What's good? It's to the worst oil ring accident ever. He's watching me YouTube, like I'm subscribed and I put notification every time I drop a video. And let's get into it.
Piper Alpha. It was July 6, 1988, and 226 men were working on Piper Alpha, an oil and gas rig 120 miles off Aberdeen, Scotland, pumping a tenth of UK oil. That morning, Pump A, one of the gas pumps, was offline for maintenance, and its safety valve, which lets out extra pressure, had been removed. The open pipe was sealed with a temporary metal cover, hand tightened. The day shift engineer wrote a permit warning that Pump A must not be switched on, placed it in an equipment box, and went home. At 9:45 p.m., Pump B failed. The night shift, unaware of the missing valve, restarted Pump A. Within seconds, pressure pushed gas through the cover and a spark set off an explosion. Jeff Bollins, the
Dang.
control room operator, hit the emergency shutdown and escaped, but the radio room was already destroyed. No evacuation order went out. The firewalls were built to hold back fire, not an explosion. Meanwhile, the Tartan and Claymore rigs kept pumping gas to Piper Alpha because their managers couldn't shut down without orders from Aberdeen. At 10:20 p.m., heat burst the Tartan pipeline, and flames shot 300 feet into the air, visible from 80 miles away. Most of the men gathered in the living
Dang.
quarters, thinking it was the safest place. Others jumped 175 feet into the freezing water below. Around 11:45 p.m., the rig collapsed, dropping the living quarters into the sea. 165 of the 226 men died, along with 2 rescuers on the rescue boat Sandhaven. 30 bodies were never recovered. Weeks later, divers pulled the living quarters up from the seafloor. 87 men were still inside.
That's
Alexander L.
crazy.
Keeland. On March 27, 1980, 212 men were on the Alexander L. Keeland, a floating hotel for oil workers in the North Sea, 200 miles off the Norwegian coast. The rig was connected by a
See, that's why I can't get a job. I have to get blow up on YouTube before. It's too hard. I can't mess with oil when junk. I put the wrong oil in the wrong oil and blow us all up.
walkway to the nearby Edda platform, where most of the men worked day shifts. That evening, they were off duty. Some were eating dinner in the mess hall, while others watched a movie. A storm was raging outside, with 40-mile-per-hour winds and 20-foot waves, but the rig had been through worse. At 6:30 p.m., a sudden lurch sent dishes flying across the tables. A small weld, only about a quarter-inch thick, had finally failed, and the brace snapped, sending one of the rig's 5 legs ripping away. The rig began to tilt. The tilt reached 30 degrees in seconds. Men slid across the floor toward the windows, while others climbed up the walls toward the lifeboats. But when they pulled the hooks, the lifeboats wouldn't release. They had been designed to lock when pulled, so the lifeboats couldn't fall by accident, but the tilting rig was now pulling on them and keeping them locked. Unable to escape, some men jumped into the freezing North Sea below. About 20 minutes after the first lurch, the Alexander L. Keeland flipped completely upside down. The rest were trapped inside and drowned, while most of those in the water froze to death before help could reach them. Of the 212 on
Froze
board,
to death. So the water is like that cold, like that cold. People can freeze to death.
123 died. One
Dang.
survivor, Anders Hellickson, later said, "In our family, all the fathers die at sea. The rig stayed upside down for 3 years before being turned upright." Seacrest. On the
Dang.
night of November 3rd, 1989, 97 men were on the Seacrest, a drilling ship in the Gulf of Thailand, 100 miles off the Thai coast. The ship was drilling for natural gas in the Platong field, and most of the crew were Thai. Tons of drill pipe were stacked high in the drilling tower. A storm was building over the South China Sea, but typhoons rarely reach this area, and the captain said there hadn't been one in over 50 years. He kept the crew working as the wind picked up. By midnight, Typhoon Gay was directly over the Seacrest. Winds reached 100 miles per hour, and waves topped 40 feet. The ship was top-heavy from all the drill pipes still standing in the drilling tower, and it began to roll heavily in the swells. The radio receiver had been removed earlier, so the crew couldn't call for help. With each wave, the Seacrest rolled harder, and water poured in through the hatches and flooded the lower decks. The rolling kept them from launching the lifeboats. Some men were thrown across the deck, while others tied themselves to the rigging to ride it out. By 3 a.m., the ship was tilted past 40.
Imagine saying bye to your kids. I see you when I get off work, just to take your last breath at work because of some oil problem.
45 degrees, and waves were breaking over the deck. Around 4
And
a.m.,
water
the
problem.
Seacrest rolled completely over and sank. Most of the crew were thrown into the dark sea and drowned, while others were trapped inside as the ship went down. 91 of the 97 men died. The 6 survivors
Dang.
clung to debris for hours before being rescued. When Thai Navy divers reached the wreck days later, they found bodies still tied to the rigging. Ocean Ranger. It was February 15th, 1980.
Like, imagine just going somewhere as a cop or something or a rescue team and finding 91 bodies under the water. 91. Not even 10. 91.
And 84 men were working on the Ocean Ranger, a drilling rig on the Hibernia field in the North Atlantic, 170 miles off Newfoundland. The Ocean Ranger was the world's biggest floating oil rig, stretching nearly 400 feet across, and its builders called it unsinkable. That night, a massive winter storm was tearing across the Grand Banks. The winds had reached over 90 miles per hour, and the waves were topping 65 feet. The crew thought they could ride it out. Around 7 p.m., a giant wave broke through a porthole in the rig's control room. Salt water hit the control panel and shorted it out. The valves opened on their own. Seawater flooded the front pontoons, and the Ocean Ranger started to tilt forward. The crew rushed to the control room to close the valves manually, but the controls were dead. They tried every backup system, but nothing worked. As the tilt grew worse, the captain sent out a mayday. By 1 a.m., the rig was leaning so far forward that the deck was already underwater, and waves were crashing across it. He ordered the crew to abandon ship. The crew launched the lifeboats into the 50-foot waves. A nearby supply ship, the Seaforth Highlander, raced through the storm and arrived within the hour, but could only watch the lifeboats roll over. Helicopters couldn't fly in those conditions. Without survival suits, the men froze in the icy water within minutes. By 3 a.m., the Ocean Ranger had sunk to the bottom of the Atlantic. Of the 84 men on board, none survived. Most of the men were never seen again. Bohai 2. On November 25, 1979, 74 men were on Bohai 2, a drilling rig in the Bohai Gulf, about 60 miles off the coast of China. Bohai 2 was one of China's biggest offshore rigs, and it was being towed to a new drilling site by 3 tugboats. The crew had forgotten to close the air pipes on the deck. A storm was building over the Gulf, with winds rising to over 60 miles per hour and waves topping 30 feet. The captain thought the tow would be routine. During the night, water poured through the open air pipes and flooded the rig's pump
Whoever forgot to close that, I know I know deep down inside, if they still alive, they hurt.
room. The pumps couldn't keep up. The engine room flooded next, the engines died, and the rig lost all power. More
That's
water poured
crazy.
in, and Bohai 2 started to tilt.
Just because
As the
somebody
rig
forgot
kept
to
taking
close
on
something.
water, the crew threw equipment overboard to balance it, but the tilt grew worse through the night. The tugboat stayed close, but couldn't help in the storm. By 3 a.m., the rig was tilted so far that the deck was nearly vertical, and men were sliding across the floor. The captain ordered the crew to abandon ship. Within minutes, Bohai 2 rolled completely over and sank to the bottom of the Gulf. Most of the men were thrown into the freezing water without life jackets, while others were trapped inside as the rig went down. The tugboats raced through the waves to pull them out, but most of the men had already frozen to death. Of the 74 on board, only 2 survived. Most of the bodies were never recovered.
That's
Anchova
crazy.
Central. On the afternoon of August 16, 1984, 144 men were on Anchova Central, an oil platform in the Campos Basin, about 50 miles off the coast of Rio de Janeiro. Anchova Central was one of Petrobras's biggest offshore platforms, pumping oil and gas from dozens of wells below. The crew was working on one of the older wells, a routine job they had done many times before. Deep below the platform, gas had been building up inside the well. The crew expected to be done by evening. Around 3 p.m., gas surged up from the well, faster than the safety valve could close. Within seconds, the gas spread across the entire deck. A spark set it off. The platform caught fire, and flames spread fast through the lower decks. Workers in the engine room and below were trapped as fire climbed toward the upper decks. Workers ran for the lifeboats. They climbed in and lowered them toward the sea. Halfway down, the hook on one lifeboat broke, and it dropped over 80 feet into the sea with 36 men inside. Most were killed when it
Dang.
hit the water. Others slid down ropes to escape, but some lost their grip and fell into the burning water. Helicopters from nearby platforms flew through the smoke to rescue survivors from the burning deck. By nightfall, rescue boats had pulled others from the water, and the fires were finally out. Of the 144 men on board, 42 died. Most died on the way out, not from the fire. Days later, the lifeboat was found floating empty in the Atlantic, far from the platform. Mumbai High North. It was July 27, 2005, and 384 men were working on Mumbai High North, an oil platform in the Arabian Sea, about 100 miles off the coast of Mumbai, India. Mumbai High North was one of India's biggest oil platforms, pumping a tenth of the country's oil. That
I ain't gonna lie, y'all making me never want to work at an oil platform in my life.
afternoon, a supply ship was approaching the platform
I don't even want to touch cooking oil no more.
to pick up a worker who'd been badly hurt. The monsoon was at its peak, and waves were topping 20 feet. The ship's captain thought the transfer would be quick. Around 5 p.m., a giant wave threw the ship hard into the side of the platform.
Dang.
The ship's helicopter deck smashed into one of the gas pipes. Gas poured out from the broken pipe and filled the air around the platform within seconds. Then came the spark. The explosion left the ship and the platform on fire. The fire spread fast across the platform, melting steel and burning through equipment in its path. Some workers reached the lifeboats above. Many others jumped 70 feet into the sea below, while the flames climbed across the deck. The supply ship was also burning out of control. Its crew was trapped on the burning deck and died in the flames. Helicopters rushed in from nearby platforms to lift survivors off the burning deck. Through the night, rescue ships pulled men from the water and fought the fires. Of the 384 men on board, 22 died. Mumbai High North, one of India's biggest oil platforms, was completely destroyed by the fire. Days later, what was left of the platform collapsed into the Arabian Sea below. Petrobras P-36. On March 15, 2001, 175 men were on Petrobras P-36, an oil platform in the Campos Basin, about 80 miles off the coast of Rio de Janeiro. Petrobras P-36 was the world's biggest oil platform, standing 40 stories tall on 4 massive legs and pumping 84,000 barrels a day. That night,
Dang.
the crew was doing routine work on one of the platform's emergency tanks. Pressure had been building inside the tank for hours. The crew expected to finish by midnight. Just after midnight, the emergency tank exploded. The blast tore through the inside of one of the platform's 4 legs. Workers rushed down to check the damage to the leg. 17 minutes later, a second explosion ripped through the same leg, killing 11 of them and breaking the seawater pipe. Water poured into the broken leg, weighing it down. The platform was now leaning hard to one side. Most of the crew rushed to the lifeboats and rowed them down to the sea. Helicopters flew in from nearby platforms to lift the rest of the crew off the deck. Rescue boats picked up the survivors below. By morning, only the bodies of the 11 dead were still on board. Over the next 5 days, salvage teams worked around the clock to keep the rig afloat. They pumped air into the broken leg day and night to force the water out. The platform kept tilting, more and more each day. On March 20th, Petrobras P-36 tipped over and sank into the Atlantic. The world's biggest oil platform now sits on the seafloor, 4,500 feet below the surface, with the 11 dead still inside. Deepwater Horizon. On the night of
So they just left their bodies in there? I ain't gonna lie, I feel them though, cause I'm not going in there. All y'all just lost y'all. I'm not going in there.
April 20th, 2010, 126 men
I gotta think about it. Some of these jobs not even getting paid that much, that good. I ain't going in there.
were on Deepwater Horizon, a floating oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico, about 40 miles off the coast of Louisiana. Deepwater Horizon was drilling the deepest oil well in history, going down more than 3 miles below the sea. The crew was finishing the job, sealing the well with cement to lock it up. Gas pressure had been building deep in the well for hours. The crew thought the well was nearly sealed. Just before 10 p.m., gas surged up the well from below. It poured onto the deck and turned the area into a gas cloud within seconds. All it took was a spark. The blast tore through the rig and killed 11 of the crew. The fire spread fast across the deck, melting steel and burning everything in its path. The rest of the crew ran for the lifeboats. Some men jumped 75 feet from the burning deck into the dark water below. Others reached the lifeboats and climbed in. A nearby supply ship rushed to pull survivors out of the water. By dawn, only the bodies of the 11 dead remained on the burning rig. Over the next 36 hours, what was left of the rig burned out of control. On April 22nd, Deepwater Horizon sank into the Gulf, but the well below kept gushing oil. Engineers took 87 days to stop the leak, and by then, 4.9 million barrels had spilled out. It became the worst oil spill in history, covering more than 1,000 miles of Gulf Coast in oil for years to come. Byford Dolphin. It was November 5th, 1983, and around 100 men were on Byford Dolphin, a floating oil rig in the North Sea, about 200
Yo, I'm just realizing there be a whole bunch of people on this junk, like a whole bunch of people on these oil rigs.
miles off the coast of Scotland. Byford Dolphin had divers living in pressurized chambers at 9 times normal air pressure, ready to work deep below. That night, 4 divers were back inside the chambers after their shift below. 2 tenders were closing up the diving bell and getting the chambers ready for sleep. The tenders thought the night was nearly over. Just before 4 a.m., one of the tenders opened a hatch too soon. The pressure inside the chambers blasted out in a split second.
I'll be damned if a nigga I'll work with the reason I pass away.
All 4 divers died on the spot. One of them was forced through a 2-foot opening.
Like imagine you about to go to sleep and the nigga you work with, that's your partner, the reason you pass away.
Torn apart by the pressure. Meanwhile, the diving bell shot up, killing one of the tenders on impact. Other
Dang.
workers came running to the chambers from across the rig. Pieces of one diver were everywhere. The other 3 were still inside the chambers, killed in an instant by the rushing pressure. Only one of the tenders survived, badly hurt. Of the 100 men on board the rig that night, 5 were dead in seconds. In the weeks that followed, recovery teams worked to gather what was left of the divers. The injured tender lived, but never worked offshore again. Investigators traced the whole disaster back to the tender opening the hatch too soon. Every diving rig got new safety locks. Byford Dolphin became the worst diving accident in history, and the industry rewrote its safety rules to make sure it never happened again. If you'd like to see more videos like this,
If you'd like to see more videos like this, subscribe to me. Don't subscribe to this nigga.